Good afternoon, everyone. Let's get started with this webinar around biophilic buildings and case studies. Definitely one of my favorite topics, so I'm very excited to be here this afternoon. So, who are we? We are the Regenerative Collaborative of South Africa. We are a non-profit organization focused on transforming our built environment into a regenerative one. We promote strategies and approaches that bring regenerative design and construction to life. We work collectively to inspire, educate, and create awareness, and to contextualize regenerative built environment approaches to the South African context. What we really want to do is to showcase local projects, local people, and local companies that are aligned with our goal, creating a regenerative future. So if you know any projects or topics, we always welcome your input. It is a collaborative, so we would be very happy to hear from you what you would like to hear in these webinars, or if you have amazing projects to showcase here as well, reach out to us. Our webinars are being recorded and posted on our YouTube channel, so if you've missed one of our webinars, you can look at them again on the YouTube. Follow us and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It really helps us with finding sponsorship if we have a larger following. And so one of the previous webinars was also on biophilia, and it was last held in August 2021. So it's been almost 2 years ago. And it was also a very interesting webinar. We had Camilla Budden speaking about biophilia, and we also had the Green School, which you will hear more about today as well from Theuna. Just a short note on becoming a sponsor. If you know a company that would like to sponsor a webinar, we are very happy and welcome this initiative. It will all go to the CPD validation of these webinars, so not that we're making any profit of it. Follow us on any of the social medias, LinkedIn, Eventbrite, or YouTube, or email us on the regenerativecollaborative@gmail.com. And as I said, following us helps us a lot in finding sponsorship for our webinars. But today we're talking about biophilic case studies, and we have two very exciting projects that are going to be showcased, the Green School in Paarl and the Fynbos building in Cape Town. And we've invited two professionals that have been working on these projects to share their knowledge and experience with these projects. I'm very excited to hear these presentations, and maybe just in very brief, what does biophilia mean? Two people already asked me today, what is it again? It sounds like a disease. It's not a disease, but it's really our innate and genetically determined love for the natural world. Biophilia literally means love of life. And so this is all going to be about how can we integrate nature into our built environment. And I think especially in our built environment, it's so important to do this right, because look what it all does to our personal thing. There's all these good things that it improves our mood, reduces anxiety, improves sleep quality, and who doesn't want that, right? So I think it is really important, especially sometimes we tend to design these really sterile environments, and I think biophilia is really the way to go to come up with more creative ways of bringing nature back into the design of our buildings. And that doesn't necessarily mean to just put plants to it. There's a much broader and wider understanding of that in terms of forms and colors and experiences. And I know Theuna is going to talk a little bit more about that. So not just plants, there's a lot more to biophilia in the built environment. And then if you are really excited about this topic and getting inspired by the presentations by our presenters today, and you want to start learning more about biophilic design, I would suggest you look into these two resources, which are both two freely available resources, and Jennifer will post a link in the chat where you can find these. And I guess these two resources are really the starting point and the best two documents that I've been working with in the past. So it's the 14 Patterns of Biophilic Design by Terrapin and the Practice of Biophilic Design by Stephen Kellett. And that will give you two different frameworks. but really useful frameworks. Back to the order of the day, we've got two speakers today. Theuna Stoltz. She's a dynamic young female architect who graduated with a master's degree from the University of Free State in 2016. She has worked on a wide range of projects, local and international, multi-residential, mixed use, and institutional design. In 2017, she joined Gas Architect, and she's responsible for overseeing the projects from concept design to completion. She approaches each project with creativity and empathy and has a keen eye for detail, passionate about social and environmental sustainability of the built environment and the enduring qualities of the buildings we make. And I'm also going to introduce the second speaker at the same time, and then we can run the presentations after each other. So our second presenter is Donovan Gillman. He's a landscape architect and principal of urban this is the word, and before this webinar I practiced it a number of times and I can't get it right again. Anyway, you can read it. I'm not going to try and waste time on it. Donovan, you can pronounce it properly. The firm designed landscapes for urban, residential, commercial, and leisure developments in southern and central Africa. His qualifications include a higher diploma in landscape and horticultural technology and a master's in landscape architecture from UCT. He's got a lot of experience, over 30 years, and he was a founding member of the South African Landscapers Institute and is a past president of ILASA. So I think we've got two excellent speakers here today. And I'm going to hand over to Theuna to kick it off with her presentation.
Thank you, Marlies, for a very good introduction. As mentioned, I'm Theuna Stoltz from Gas Architecture Studios, where our work is dedicated to human-centric design. Today, I'm excited to delve into the fascinating world of biophilic design and share our inspiring green school journey. Join me as we explore how integrating natural elements into our built environment can enhance well-being and foster sustainable, nurturing spaces for future generations. First of all, I just want to take a moment to really thank and commend the exceptional professional team whose dedication and creativity have brought this project to life, and none of this would have been possible without them. Building Green School South Africa is a passion project of a couple and their 3 daughters. They are inspired by a different vision for education and the impact that it can have on a different physical learning environment, and decided to build a green school in their hometown in Paarl, South Africa, not only to create an educational experience that they had in Green School Bali, but also to give back to their local community. Green School South Africa really being the product and culmination of years of dedication and understanding of sustainability. Everything about this project was personal, initially to the founders, but as the professional and construction teams became involved, the sense of ownership and personal commitment to create an extraordinary space of beauty and intention was shared. A strong direction was given by the client in terms of the aesthetics, but also in terms of sustainability objectives, and to create a beautiful sensory space that is nature-inspired and pioneer new ways in which humans can live regeneratively on this planet. Just a bit of background on where this project started. It all started in 2019 as a competition scheme, and GAS was awarded to realize the project. We broke ground at the beginning of 2020, and then COVID happened and brought everything to a halt, as all of you would know and also experienced. But with our resilient and innovative team, the school was still able to open its doors in February 2021. Human beings are creative and capable of adding complexity and beauty to the natural environment, improving people's happiness and health, and bringing joy to the process of learning. This is the vision behind Green School South Africa and its aim to achieve the Living Building Challenge certification. The Living Building Standard and Challenge is currently the world's most stringent green building certification, which requires for buildings and campuses not only to be sustainable, but also regenerative. It basically means for the campus or the building to produce more energy than it uses, to use less water than the site naturally receives, increases rather than reduces biodiversity and beauty on site, and be healthy, providing plenty of natural light, fresh air, food, a close connection to nature, and a sense of community. But it also has to include and focuses largely on the inclusion of biophilic design, which considers the human love and need for nature, as mentioned by Marloes earlier. The Green School South Africa has been designed and developed according to the Living Building Standards and its 7 petals. The 7 petals being, firstly, the place petal, which focuses largely on biophilic design, passive design principles, the restoring of biodiversity, and the creation of natural landscapes. The second petal being beauty, requiring to create inspirational spaces. Thirdly, the water petal, which requires for the building or the site to purify water, harvest it, and also to treat all wastewater on site. The energy petal, requiring for the building to have a net positive energy outcome. The materials petal, which requires for the architect or the designers to work with natural, salvaged, and recycled materials, but also making sure that no harmful chemicals and products can be used during the construction process and during the build of the buildings. The equity petal, really focusing on the inclusion of community and involvement. And then lastly, the health and happiness petal, which focuses on optimizing well-being through the use of feng shui and then the design and inclusion of access to nature. With the Green School, we will be discussing all of these petals and seeing how we've included it during our design process. Firstly, we will start off by understanding biophilic design and the place petal under which it falls. Biophilic design stems from the word biophilia, which was coined in 1964 by psychoanalyst Erich Fromm, which means the love of nature and underpins all the principles of the living building challenge. This idea was then further developed and worked on by Edward Owen Wilson, biologist. He took a bit of a more evolutionary approach to it, and he developed the biophilia hypothesis, stating that humans are genetically predisposed to be attracted to nature. After that, the ecologist Stephen Kellett then took it and broke it down into elements, patterns, and features that can be brought into the built environment. In summary, this is basically our understanding of these biophilic elements and the 3 core principles of it, and the ways in which we've included it into the Green School. The first being the direct experience, which is the inclusion of real sensory forms of nature, like sunlight, plants, water, air, and animals. For instance, at Green School, we've got a chicken coop, a few dogs, cats, and there's a few roaming rabbits. Secondly, it's the indirect experiences, which refers to the representation and mimicking of nature through the use of texture, pattern, natural materials, colors, and shapes and forms. And then lastly, the human spatial response, really focusing on the design and creation of spaces that are exciting, stimulating, safe, restorative, recuperative, and aspirational. During the design process and the evolution of the buildings, we need to make sure, and we also had to think about how do we include these different elements at different scales, frequencies, durations, intensities, and this is all evident in Green School South Africa. Biophilic design is an evidence-based design strategy with research that has been shown and done over the last 30 years that show the direct connection and the impact that a direct connection with nature can have, and the critical effect that it can have also on the early childhood development. And it can also improve our cognitive function, performance, and well-being. It can also increase productivity, performance, and a sense of community, and also increase the speed of learning. However, it's also one of the first things in the modern built environment that easily gets neglected and pushed to the side. Biophilic design and the living building challenge requires that all of these experiences of the natural world should be considered and brought in at every step of the design process, from the initial conceptualization of the space and how it is used, through to the design of the buildings and its finishes. Firstly, looking at the concept development specific to the place petal and how the Green School site development plan evolved. The Green School campus and buildings, is all spatially defined by the surrounding mountains, with Paarlberg to the north, the Drakenstein Mountains to the east, and Simonsberg to the south, with the site sitting in the center and the mountains all celebrating and containing the low-lying green valley in between. The campus constitutes of various clusters of buildings linked together with meandering routes and is surrounded by edible gardens. The architecture of the individual buildings are defined by organic tectonic shapes originating from the surrounding mountains that contains the valley. Solid shapes are arranged to accommodate the programmatic need of the individual buildings. Here we are specifically looking at the kindergarten cluster, where the different classrooms have been linked together with a canopy roof, really referencing the idea of a membrane within a singular cell or a fruit. Another example of an indirect experience are the large oversailing organic shaped roofs that create shade and dappled light, which resemble the deconstructing leaf and has also been designed to catch rainwater. It is all then gravity fed down to the bottom of the site, the lowest portion, where there's also a water purification treatment facility. There's also additional water storage facilities on the left, making sure that we achieve all of the goals set out within the water petal. The 8-hectare site is situated next to the R45, which links Paarl with Franschhoek. The site has been carefully developed from a site development point of view, making sure that there's only 8% of the site being covered with built fabric. The rest of it is left over for the restoration and reinstatement of biodiversity, mainly focusing on the inclusion of local renosterveld and then also edible gardens. All of the buildings have been strategically placed on the site, really focusing on the idea of the buildings being tucked into the landscape and functioning as background buildings, really putting the focus back on the natural and surrounding landscape. When the visitor arrives on the site, you will be visited firstly by the admin building, which sits on the central or main axial spine, which links all of the more public buildings together. These buildings include the Sanke building, which is a Balinese term for school hall. Here we've got the tree-lined market space, which also includes the deli, a co-working space, and a coffee shop, which is open to the community. There's a lot of parents that come and drop off their children in the morning and then spend the rest of the day working in the co-working space, which further contributes and fosters the idea of community at the school and on campus. Further along this main circulation spine, we terminate and end in the heart of the school, which is formed by 3 boulder-like shapes. To the north, we've got a dining hall, a production kitchen, and a life lab. And then to the south, ablution facilities, art studio, library, music studio, and the heart of the school, and heart of solar. The heart of solar is a spot where all of the batteries are stored and is linked to the PV system, which is located on the heart of the school roof. This really to make sure that we achieve everything as stated within the energy petal, making sure the campus and the buildings generate more energy than the entire campus uses. From the heart of the school, the main circulation spine branches off into carefully considered meandering routes, some of them hidden and overgrown to create moments of excitement, wonderment, and discovery, which touches on the curiosity and enlightenment aspect of the Living Building Challenge. There are also no directional signage on campus, which really encourages and entices the children and allowing them to explore and discover the campus. The secondary routes all lead to the various classroom clusters, the first being the primary school, the recently completed middle school, and then also the kindergarten cluster. This is an image which really encapsulates the idea where the buildings are tucked into the landscape and really becoming subsidiary to the landscape. All the classrooms also spill out into landscape courtyards, creating protected pockets where the different groups and ages can socialize in. Furthermore, the Living Building Challenge requires for the project to incorporate place-based solutions and contribute to the expansion of the regional economy, which is rooted in sustainable practices, products, and services, really to make sure that we celebrate local craftsmanship and materials. The LBC does not only limit you in terms of the radius in which you can procure products and materials, but also in terms of the materials and the products that can be used to construct buildings, really making sure that no harmful and chemical products can be used on site. This list is illustrated here on the right-hand side, which is called the material red list, and is essentially the list that prohibits all of the materials that can be used on site. In the United States, they have a very useful tool called the Declared Product Materials Database, where all products have already been vetted and gone through a whole process with specialists, making sure that none of those products contain any of these harmful materials. However, in South Africa, we do not have such a resource, and us as the professional team had to go through a vetting process for all of the materials and had to work closely with the team and our environmental consultants from the Tiramanzi group to make sure that all of the building materials that we use comply with this material red list. Examples of some of these products and materials are, for instance, the fire retardant paint that was used to treat all of the ductretes or the reed ceilings in the classrooms to make sure that we comply from a fire regulation point of view, the steel paint that was used to treat all of the steel on site, because galvanizing does not comply with the living building standards, and polyscreed floors. Some of the products and materials were successful, and some of them were less successful. We also had a sampling station on site where all materials were tested. This sample structure is still there today, where we test all of the materials now for the recently completed middle school, but also will use it for the testing of any future materials for the high school. It also forms part of the educational program where the school children go to learn from. It is not just for us as the professional team to learn from, but also for them to see how the materials age, degrade, and gain patina over time. Examples of some of the less successful products include some of the reiterations in the paint that we had to change to make sure that it complies with the red list of materials, and then also the lime plaster floors. Even though the lime plaster creates an absolutely beautiful finish, it requires quite a lot of maintenance, and specific to the use of the school, it's not very hard wearing, and there was a lot of maintenance and reinstallation required. It was also quite interesting to see during this process how the children engaged with the different lime surfaces, really taking ownership of these surfaces and changing it into canvases on which they painted mandalas on the floors and created artwork with chalk and mud on the walls, which you'll see in some of the next slides. Other materials that we used on site include rammed earth walls, which was made up of clay and soil harvested from the site, ductreed ceilings with the reed that we harvested from a nearby area around the site, stone-cladded walls and gabion walls, with the stone also being harvested from a nearby site, reclaimed teak doors, timber cladding, clay elements that was inserted into lime plaster to create wall finishings, and then the use of recycled Nespresso pots to create the Green School main sign. This is a photo of one of the letters for the Green School sign. We went through quite a rigorous process with the local municipality, the craftsmen, and the structural engineers to get this right. These letters were constructed from steel and timber and then finished off with recycled Nespresso pods. For this specific letter, we used approximately 10,000 pods. This is the photo illustrating the artworks that the children created on the lime plaster walls. A photo of one of the classrooms at the kindergarten cluster, really illustrating the natural materials and textures within these spaces. During the first phase, we also spent quite a lot of time on playing around with opening, sizes, and proportions. One of the elements we looked at was playing around with the windowsill heights. So here at the kindy, this is one of the lowest windowsill heights we've got. And it was amazing to see on the first day that the school opened, to see instead of the children using the doors to access the classroom, they all jumped through the windows, which was quite special. Each classroom has also received a special and specific reclaimed salvaged teak timber door. These doors were all saved from recently demolished buildings within the Paarl region, and each of them tell a very special and specific story. This is a photo of the teacher's pod at the kindergarten cluster, which has been constructed of rammed earth and in combination also with clay bricks, which has been finished off with lime plaster. Initially, when we started off with the green school, we wanted to build all of the buildings with rammed earth, but due to COVID and the stringent timelines on this project, we had to revert back and do some of the buildings in clay bricks, which is locally manufactured in the surrounding area, and finished it off with lime plaster. In February of this year, we completed the middle school, also known as the senior school. And on this specific image that we are looking at, we are looking towards the entrance to the middle school with the think tank building on the left, cladded in timber, and the makerspace on the right. It is evident in this recently completed phase how the professional team and us as the architects grew, and also how the materials and finishes evolved, which I think is a great testimony to the growth and development of the professional team, the school, the requirements for the various age groups, and their needs and how it all evolved over time. Lastly, ending off with the equity, health and happiness, and beauty petals, the living building standard requires for all waste to be treated on site. On the existing site, there were 3 farmhouses which we renovated and transformed into a maintenance and recycling hub, which is open to the community and strengthens the idea of involvement. There's also a compost station here to the left of the recycling center, where all of the food scraps end up at and gets worked back into the edible gardens. The children all receive a wholesome lunch each day with the fruit, herbs, and vegetables all harvested from the grounds, all contributing to the health, happiness, and well-being of the campus. After the completion of the first phase of Green School, 3 different climate surveys were done to understand the user and occupancy satisfaction and to see if the inclusion of the biophilic design elements and the various living building challenge petals really does have an effect. And with all 3 surveys, we received increased feedback, stating that the campus is what they find most inspiring and fulfilling. During our Green School journey, we regularly met with teachers, children, and the various educational bodies, which helped us to not only design more specifically to their needs, but also to get feedback on what we have designed, which added a lot of extra information and layers into the design process. It also contributed not only to our experience, but also ensured a better end product and further increased user satisfaction. And I think this is a really important part, which we as architects should engage with, also with that portion, and also focus on this portion of the process. It really played and is playing a major role in the way that we think and the way that we design for Green School and its various phases. Lastly, I would like to close out with a quote from the co-founder of Green School South Africa, Alba Brandt. A school that educates for sustainability must reimagine how humans can live on Earth. A vision can be powerful. Our vision attracted a professional team who experienced personal inspiration and a deep connection to our project, transforming the design and construction process from just another job into a shared mission. It felt like everyone was part of a frontier team, pioneering new methods, materials, and opening new possibilities. The result? A campus with intangible qualities. It feels more like a retreat than a learning institution. There is a wonderful sense of calm and connectedness to it all. Whether that is the feng shui, good acoustics, abundance of plants and animal life, softness of natural colors, brilliance of biophilic design, or the combination of everything? Maybe the authenticity of the materials allows us to be authentic, allows us to be vulnerable, joyful, happy, to connect with ourselves and each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was awesome. Wow, it's so amazing to see how this project has evolved over the years and to see that it's really coming to life. So we're gonna give Donovan the opportunity to present first, and then we'll do our question, answer, and discussion at the end.
Thanks. Hi, everyone.
Great.
So here's my take on biophilic design of the Fynbos, and I'll have a question for you at the end about whether it's biophilic or technophilic. But here we go. So our approach is, we believe, putting people at the center of everything we do, and thereby creating environments people love to be in. The systematic design process encompasses land, climate, living systems, urban landscape, people-centered, your building, and are creating spaces for life. The involvement of that is water-sensitive design, green roofs, planting and living walls, water storage, ecological planting design, resilience, people-centered design focus, and creating vibrant urban spaces. Places we've been involved in, some of them over the years, large shopping centers, Rotanga Junction, the theme park, what it looked like after 25 years. So other areas of Century City we've been involved in, areas that were put in place, the framework was 20 years ago, and now filled out with buildings around it has created living environments. We also train people in a wide range of horticultural and landscape skills. So our services are there for you to see. So the question that was raised with us by a developer was, can we grow trees and large plants on buildings in central Cape Town? And this was inspired by a building in Milan called the Bosco Vertical. So we compared the temperature and rainfall and wind speed in Milan to Cape Town. So although Milan experiences brief periods of high wind and similar temperatures, we experience far more in Cape Town, much longer period of high winds. But the overall intensity of wind at various times in Milan is roughly similar. So the question arose was the possibility of successfully planting and maintaining large areas of living vegetation on buildings in central Cape Town. The general opinion has been that this seems impossible, technically challenging, or financially unfeasible. People like the idea, but skeptical it can be done here. Whereas the challenges are the Bosco Vertical has been thriving for several years, confounding critics. Plantings have failed on buildings in Cape Town and elsewhere. And if they are too successful, damage from roots or plant load would be overwhelming. When green roofs go wrong, compromised by drainage, better systems, interruptions to the water supply, management changed, and the maintenance of plants and irrigation is stopped. For example, the day zero scenario, many irrigated plantings in open ground containers died without backup summer water source. So for every challenge, we looked at finding a solution and an opportunity. So extreme wind, ensure plants and irrigation supply needs even an extreme solution. Failure of normal water supply, we have a triple backup water supply. Extreme northwesterly winter winds, ensure a strength system can withstand wind forces. Isolated trees, we used grouping the trees together to create shelter. Fynbos planting needn't be so exciting, but by looking at a variety of plants and creating an interesting environment, we hope to overcome that. Vegetation can be a fire hazard. choose plants with little dry material mass, low fire hazard, and through maintenance, make sure there is none of that. Finding suppliers for large trees, we source supply trees widely and prepare in a local nursery for 2 to 3 years. Other problems are poor species choices, inadequate understanding of natural soil, optimum growth and growing media, inadequate drainage, poor installation, poor nutrition, little or no planned maintenance, no management program for replacement, and no rejuvenation strategy spanning at least 30 years or longer. So our resilient landscape theory that we give courses in shows us that we need to think in terms of reducing exposure to systems failure. So a triple backup is applied to each design element to reduce the risk of failure of the systems. Failure would result in death or damage. One of the most pressing things was the wind component. So yeah, we looked at all the information from the Bosco Vertical, which has been published in a number of publicly accessible case studies, and these have been documented in these various case studies. So one of them is that the large wall of wind in Florida's university was put to the test, and they found that at higher wind speeds, the plants recover and that the trees reduce vortex shedding. Tree flexibility allowed significant deflections without failure. In Cape Town, a wind study of a previous building with the Spear Tower, which was the same height, shows the predicted wind speeds and high velocity areas. And interpreting that, we had a wind study done, which shows that within the building envelope, blue is like the slowest wind speeds, red is the highest. And around the building itself, there's an envelope where there's lower wind speeds, and thus would make it possible. Interpreting that into these hand drawings, we showed areas that were sweet spots, the green areas, where we might plant areas, and then in the red and the orange of areas to avoid planting. Within the Bosco Vertical, they came upon recommended 3 different restraint systems. One is a root ball restraint, 2 is a tie to the building above, and 3, what we have is there's the steel cable support and textile fixed root binding system. And we, in addition, have a surface restraint system of a mesh to avoid the growing medium from blowing away. These are the commercial restraint systems we'll be using. And this one is for the restraint of the root ball in the containers. And this one is for the restraint of the root ball where they're not in containers, but on the various roof gardens of the building. The actual tree installation, this is Bosco Vertical, trees being placed, and it's roughly similar that we'll be doing here. Then one of the most critical things was how to select plants that will survive. The most studied area of vegetation in the country is Table Mountain. It was the first area that was colonized, and the University of Cape Town with its botany department have done numerous studies over the years. So we took those studies and we applied all the way from the upper ledges of the Table Mountain down to the coast in modifying and selecting trees and plants that would survive these conditions. In these conditions, trees and plants survive more severe conditions than will be encountered on the building. So we are involved in the detailed planting design, which will take place in the detailed design, which is starting from this June. Tree and plant selection with arborists, botanists, and horticulturists. We'll be taking on the procurement of raw material, preparation and growing with local tree and Fynbos plant growers, the handling and delivery to site, and then installation and securing, replacement planting for strategy for ongoing maintenance. The tree maintenance and planting will be done from external, so we'll have the same as Bosco Vertical flying gardeners. Maintenance will be from the outside of the building. One of the things that can happen is the trees can grow too well. So we have a system of controlling the growth rate, reducing the size of trees and shrubs, proportions suited to the position on the building. Then the engineering type situation is to do with water supply, water distribution, planters, the internal plant, pond, wall and hanging plant. So we have a triple backup supply of irrigation water. There's a constant supply of water year-round underground, which will be pumped from the basement drainage. We will use recycled stored stormwater as a second backup, and then we have a private water supply, which in case both fail. Control of the irrigation will be integrated with a monitoring and AI control system, which I'll describe in more detail. The individual planters consist of a balcony planter, which is linked to the drainage system, and these tree planters, which are independent, standing free from the building. And that's just a rough view of what each individual one will look like. Overall, there are levels of planters in those, and then there are also some planting on the building in open planters. The tree planters and the fixing of the mechanical planters, of the tree planter and of the balcony planters. And then one of the constraints is that the roots do not block the drainage system or the irrigation. So we are using a copper geotextile. Copper has the capability of defending itself from roots, allowing this not to happen. Copper liaises the root tips and forces them not to perform. So we'll be using that and an air drainage pipe system. This is the planter of the tree planter, how it's secured to the building, and then how our tree planters are integrated into that planter with restraints, a space for the water meter, and then the air pipe drainage system, irrigation systems in blue and pink, and then a cable support down to the bottom steel support of the building, and an intermediary system holding the root ball to the inside of the planter, and then the top mesh holding the growth medium in place. This is what a young tree will be planted, a 2 to 3 meter tree planting, secured to the base, and then how it will grow up to 4 to 5 meter mature tree. So then the core of this system is a very technically advanced AI system to monitor tree and planter evaporation, solar radiation, and other climatic effects, measuring nutrition, fertility, to select trees on the full facade. So 3 sample trees on each side of the facade will have this complete monitoring system. The information is fed into an AI-based intelligent control system, which manages the watering and nutrition of the trees. And under the research period, will allow us to refine the Hungarian Gremon systems, AI-based system, to work with our agronomists and their specialists on fine-tuning to our special condition. The Gremon system is currently used in agriculture, and this will be a first of them using it in ornamental horticulture. So the biomass measurement checks the amount of irrigated water, adjusts the irrigation based on radiation, is smartphone compatible, and there's an alarm system if plant weights or water content level drops below a certain level. The AI component allows plants never experience moisture stress in their root systems, are monitored continuously for their nutrition requirements, and the microclimate conditions of temperature, wind, sun or shade, and cloud cover monitor weather stations are monitored by weather stations on the building. The weather information is used by the AI system to control additional watering. This will further enable the plants to withstand the extreme conditions. The Theuna weight measurement platform has been specially scaled up. This picture is of it in a cherry orchard in Hungary, internal cherry orchard, and ours has been scaled up. There are 24 different parameters that are measured, and they are fed into the AI system and every 5 seconds. So where there is no weight platform, I was on the balconies, and I mean on the trees on the roof gardens, there's a soil moisture sensor, which does the same job as the weight platform. The weight platform is connected to a data logger and to the climate control, and all of this is fed into the system. We'll not be using natural soil, we'll be using an environmentally sustainable hydroculture medium, cleans the air, it's hygienic, pest-free, and allows the soil or the medium to maintain its aeration without becoming waterlogged. The fertilization systems and advanced fertigation medium. The fertigation of the plants is based on the low nutrition of Fynbos, and the tree planters receive solid nutrients once every 6 months through the air pipe system, so that the low phosphate and nitrogen requirements of the Fynbos is maintained. For further defense against root intrusion, we're using a copper-based Netafim watering system, drip watering system, as well as a backup watering system of responsive drip irrigation. This is a drip system that, like where the roots chemically absorb the water they need from this drip pipe. The growing medium is a mineral medium based on leaker, which is an expanded clay ball, crushed leaker, local perlite, a rock wool mat, and the local zeolite. Then the aesthetics of the building will be taken into account, where we'll create various color bands through the use of the plantings growing and flowering at various times of the year. The exact species mix will be worked out during the construction, detail design, and research period. So this is one of the levels where there are large planters and then individual balcony planters and trees. On the internal side, there is a large atrium which is partially in darkness. So we are going to create a living environment there with LED lighting tied to the external lighting, and this will give the plants and the internal facing departments looking onto this natural environment. The large water feature and large planted trees. In order to create this lush environment, we've developed a hanging planter system, as well as this large water feature, pumped storage water feature. The water feature will be both based on an Oasa Myla lace thread fountain, so there won't be a lot of water splashing around, but it'll give a controlled feeling of this large water feature. And then the indoor hanging baskets are modeled on a number of large baskets we've observed over the years, and these will hang down to continue this lush environment. The trees are being grown by just trees in pole, and we will then take all of our planting into this environment, and it will then move on to the Fynbos. So that's from me. I look forward to this project coming online and be able to share the results with you in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Donovan. I had a bit of a nervous thing when I knew that you're going to have 100 slides, but you went for good timing. Thank you for that. I'm going to start with a question from Mark Charette. Jenna, thanks for the presentation. A wonderful best practice example of a school design for Africa. As I understand, you targeted the petal certification of the Living Building Challenge. How far away are we from getting a real Living Building Challenge certified building?
Thanks for the question. So currently we are still in process with the certification. We have not yet received the certification. The main focus is really to get the entire campus fully developed. So we've recently, as I mentioned in the presentation, have completed the third phase, which includes the middle school / senior school. The last phase would be the high school. So the intent is really for us to complete this entire project and then complete the certification process. But in terms of when can we expect a school or a building to be certified as living building compliant, I'm not sure. Hopefully soon. I think also just a note on that, once and if the Green School has been certified, it will also be the first building in Africa to receive the certification.
Yeah, well done. I mean, that is definitely a hectic sustainability rating system. So
yeah,
very
it all
impressive.
has been designed and developed according to the framework set out to ensure that we can achieve that in the end.
So I think the second question from Mark is also, what has been the greatest challenge so far in maintaining such a biodiverse landscape?
I think, first of all, the school has a very equipped landscaping team who manages the gardens and the biodiversity on site. There are also an activity called Stappy, where the children can actually choose to take part in different activities on campus. And one of these activities being spending some time with the gardeners and assisting them, really also becoming part of the educational program and their curriculum, where the biodiversity and the gardens become part of their educational experience. But I think to highlight one of the incidents that we experienced, which was quite terrifying, right at the completion of the first phase and opening of the school, was we had a wood borer infestation. And with all of the natural materials and the timber on site, that was quite problematic. And luckily we had a very competent team that dealt with it, and the school didn't really lose a lot of trees. But one of the components which didn't necessarily affect the landscaping, but more the buildings, was that the wood borers loved the natural pendants. So we ended up having to remove actually all of the pendants in the dining hall of the heart of the school.
Oh, that sounds horrible. Oh my God. Some intentional consequences.
Yeah.
Another question, how does the design, from Gabby, how does the design, or rather the overall landscape, deals with the drought, or were drought tolerant principles applied in the event of a low rainfall season?
Okay, so we had consulting engineers on this project who calculated the school's demand in terms of water that's required for drinking, cooking, and washing. And they also estimated the peak load and demand required for irrigation. So they worked closely with DDS Landscaping, who is the landscape architects on this project. And the site also, as I mentioned, harvests water, which is then stored in the dam at the bottom of the site. But we also have 3 storage facilities next to the Sanke building. And these 3 tanks are specifically used for irrigation purposes, fire water, and maintenance. So the loads are all calculated to make sure that we will be able to work within those regions. But the campus also has a borehole, which helps us in terms of if we would experience a drought.
Nice. And I guess in addition to that, with the Living Building Challenge, you have to be, besides completely energy neutral, you also need to be water neutral. So
yes, exactly.
That's also another challenge. Yeah.
So on the site, we also have a water treatment plant where all of the wastewater is treated. We also have a water purification station.
Nice. Donovan, here's a question for you, also from Mark. Noting the critically endangered nature of the vegetation types of the city of Cape Town, how much of the planting is locally indigenous to the original vegetation types? As I understand, Fynbos is a shrub and not a tree-dominated landscape.
Yeah, that's correct. Within all of the vegetation is from the Fynbos biome. All of the trees are the ones found on Table Mountain and in the surrounding valleys. They're actually mostly not Fynbos, but they are Afromontane forest, remnant Afromontane forest that occurs on the mountain. So all of the plants are from those two biomes. We are drawing Fynbos planting, which, as he's correctly said, is not a tree-dominated environment. However, on the Fynbos, on the mountain itself, numerous of the trees that grow in the Afromontane forest are found on the mountain. For example, Podocarpus or Afrocarpus are found on the mountain, growing in the mountain area itself as a much dwarfed tree. I don't know if that answers the question.
I think it does. I think that's also your best first strategy, to have localized plants implemented. And there's a comment from Graham. Well done, Donovan. An excellent case study of showing a relationship between focused research and design detailing solutions. And you seem to have covered all the bases. And then there's a question from John. How many trees and shrubs will be used in the Fynbos?
There will be over 250 trees of 30 different species, as I say, representing virtually all of the trees that are on the mountain itself. The shrubs, will be 50 different species and varieties of Fynbos shrubs, drawing from the mountain, but also drawing from the Fynbos biome further afield, and drawing from horticultural varieties of those species.
And how was that for you as a landscape architect to actually get that opportunity to do that research? I would imagine you don't often get that opportunity to actually do such a crazy project.
No, it's the culmination of a long period, very long time of being involved in this, and with the resilient planting design that we do, the study of the local biome, and I've done this through in various African countries, but this is the first real opportunity I've had to study the mountain in such depth.
I can imagine. Wow. Okay, I've got a question from Louisa for China. How have you designed for the different type of learning in the classroom?
So at the kindergarten, the different classrooms have been linked together. So it's basically two classrooms and they've got a linking element, really allowing for the smaller children to be constantly connected to one another. The kindergarten is also enclosed, so it's totally surrounded and sitting within a bermed landscape to really protect the smaller children from the rest of the campus, creating an internal world. And then for the primary school, the buildings have been detached, but still being connected with the linking canopy element. And then lastly, now in the middle school or the senior school, we've actually, so at the primary school, the classes are about 67 square meters in size. And at the middle school, what we've done is really focusing on the idea where the classrooms become more and act more like a studio space, really giving the children the opportunity to build out and develop the spaces on their own, seeing what they require so it suits what their growing need.
And how did the whole design of the buildings, does it inspire the curriculum in some kind of way? Like, is there knowledge of like the ideas that you guys had as the architects around designing these classrooms and sites? Has it been taken up into the curriculum?
Yes, it has. So for instance, there's also a really big focus on site to celebrate and expose the services. So at the heart of the school, for instance, we've got the Heart of Solar. So all of the batteries, everything has been displayed. So it's visible and the children can track the entire process. They can see how the energy comes in, how it's being generated through the PV panels, but also how does the consumption work? When they start using the production kitchen, how does the energy drop? And so also for the drainage on site, the water systems, all of that is exposed and becomes part of their educational system.
Right. Donovan, there's a question here around the irrigation system. Based on the complexity of the irrigation, fertilization, and AI integration of the various systems, what is the predicted lifespan of the various components in the system, and what were the key design considerations for maintainability and obsolescence protection?
That's a very good question. The lifespan of the supply system is around about 30 years. So within that period, the supply system has to be upgraded and updated. And Gremon have a process whereby they are continuously, every 2 years, upgrading their management system to the latest operating system. The hardware has, as you know, probably only a 10-year lifespan in terms of computer obsolescence. So we've put that into the maintenance component. It's a very small component because basically about the equivalent of 3 laptops that are involved. And then the actual hardware, the hardware of the system, there's no particular reason why the drip system should deteriorate. It's not exposed to sun, but it is accessible and would be quite likely upgradable in time. That will have to be ascertained as it goes along. So I don't know if that helps answer the question. The monitoring system, the actual weight platform monitoring system, is expected to give out after 10 to 15 years. But we will have then sufficient data over that period that we'll be able to manage it on the information that has been taken care of. The other component is the actual replacement of trees. We have taken into account that some trees might die, and therefore we will replace them, cut them down, and replace them with smaller trees of a suitable species that has been proven to survive. So that's our replacement strategy over the time.
I guess it would also mean that you would have to almost have like a full-time person at the building that is looking at all these systems and maintaining the plants in this building.
Yes, there's a long-term maintenance contract that will go with the building, and it's written into the contract of the ownership of the building, and that would take place on a 2-weekly basis for site visits, and then a continuous monitoring system and seeing that the monitoring system is working.
And construction of the building has started already, correct?
Yeah, the basement floors are busy being put in place, and detailed design is commencing this coming month.
And if anyone is interested, I think there's still units for sale. So if anybody wants to live in the first Biophilic residential building, go to the website. I didn't get paid to do a sales pitch here, but I think it is a great opportunity. There's a question from Kobus Schrebers. Why is galvanizing considered undesirable for the Living Building Challenge standard? And what alternatives did you consider for the walls, and what made you settle on rammed earth?
So with regards to galvanizing, it's not necessarily always just with regards to the actual finish. It also has to do with the process. So there's a lot of research during the vetting process that's done in terms of, for instance, we also went through a process with natural treatments to treat the wood, etc., where we were looking at linseed oil, but because it's cold pressed in the way in which it's stored, that affected the actual use and the inclusion of that product. So it doesn't necessarily just have to do with the actual product and its ingredients. So as an alternative to galvanizing, we looked at a special paint that we developed with plascon specifically. Then in terms of the different wall finishes and why did we settle on rammed earth, what we really liked initially, and I still love it, is the different stratification layers that is visible in rammed earth, and it really tells a story. I think also when we started on site, there was the soil on site had a very high clay content. So in terms of the living building and really making use of all of the resources on site and the use of natural materials, we were naturally drawn towards that. But like I mentioned, because of COVID and us having to get the first phase of Green School ready within a few months, basically less than a year, for the doors to open for the first few kids to occupy the school, we had to look at alternative methods of construction and also finishing. So we made use of locally manufactured bricks in the surrounding area, and that was then finished off with lime plaster, so we could still use the soil and clay from the site to still achieve a very natural look. And it's absolutely beautiful to see how the buildings also age, and during the different seasons how the patina and the color of the buildings change because of this natural material and the lime plaster. So currently we only have 2 buildings on site being constructed of rammed earth.
I think in addition to that, Siobhan asked, with all the testing of the products that you had to do for the red list to be red list compliant, and I know it's a lot of work because we also worked on that Living Building Challenge project, and I guess 80% of your time almost goes into like selecting the right products. Is there a platform where you're going to publish all your findings that you found of the products that you've used, and is there an opportunity to compile and publish a more official list for South Africa?
Yes, I think there's definitely an opportunity, and we have received various requests for that. I think one of my roles also in our company is really looking at materials and finishes. So it's something that I'm very passionate about. I've also recently reached out to the Material Council to understand from their side different ways and methods to capture this information and how to make it accessible within our office, starting on a smaller scale and then seeing how it can actually be brought out and made public.
Awesome.
But I think all of the tracking has been captured, and that's also where the environmental consultants Teramanzi came in, where they tracked the entire process. They ran and assisted us throughout the tracking process and vetting with the various suppliers and product developers.
If you want to do a collaboration with the RCSA on this, we would be very happy to do that. And we can also draw from our experience on the projects that we worked on.
Cool.
There's a comment from Alex. Given that it is a school and in a South African context, how has safety been considered within the design, especially with the openness and open to the public parts?
Okay, so the school is enclosed with a fence. On the R45, it also has been lined with trees, and there's also a very large berm. So really, instead of making use of standard fencing within all of the various regions on the campus, we've made use of landscape strategies, either berms or growing tunnels, for instance. We've also, at the kindergarten specifically, with the main focus of creating an inner world, we've got farm gates that encloses that portion of the campus. So there is different strategies that has been included in terms of a security point of view. And we haven't had any security incidents on site.
Awesome. That's really a different way of addressing with security than we normally do in our context. I know as part of the Living Building Challenge, you also have to have open days for the public. So if people want to come and visit, do you have a date set for the next open day?
I'll just have to check with the green school, but they do have open days every now and then. People also reach out to us as the architect, and the interior designer that worked on Green School is now fully employed at Green School, and she runs the entire process. So it is possible and available. You just need to reach out and arrange beforehand.
Great. All right. I'm going to wrap up the webinar. Okay, so I have to mention this from Hanneli could say, can you tell everyone about the wonderful, huge old fig tree that you saved? So that's a nice one to end off the questions with. Well done.
There's, just before you enter the courtyard of the heart of the school, there is 3 really big, huge fig trees. And the client went through a very rigorous process in terms of that. And during the rescue process, there was also quite a lot of planning, because it was during the COVID process or time, in terms of the transportation and getting the trees there. So the client has a whole story and experience of where it was founded and where and how it got there.
Nice. Just a reminder for our next events. So next month, we're going to talk about eco-mobility. And in July, we have a webinar planned around reinventing retail spaces. So how can we think differently about shopping centers? And in August, we're thinking around regenerative gardens and natural pools. A massive thank you to both presenters today. 2 completely different presentations, but both super interesting, and the school very inspiring. And Donovan, you really showed us how technically difficult it is to put plants and trees into a building. I really hope that project is going to take off and that we're going to see this building in Cape Town. That's very exciting. Thank you guys so much for sharing your knowledge and experience with us here. I think I sincerely enjoyed both presentations. And thank you to Sayat for giving the validation, CPD validation for free this webinar so that we could host it again. So a big thank you to Sayat. And then, yes, just a call for sponsorship. If you know somebody that wants to back us up and sponsor a webinar, please let us know. And lastly, follow us up on our social media and our YouTube channel. It means a lot, the likes and the subscriptions. So please take time to do that. And I think with that, thank you very much for attending. I think this was one of the most registered webinars of the year. And I think it was well attended. And I really appreciate your time. And I hope you have a good evening. And thanks again, Theuna and Donovan, for sharing your experience. Have a lovely evening and see you next month.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.